This is the Inclusion Conversation. I'm your host, Grace Young Foster, founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative. I'm an adoptee, I'm a foster care alum, and I'm passionate about elevating our communities. It's time we're included and visible in the conversations about work, careers, and just life. Let's be visible and let's be loud. Join me now. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Inclusion Conversation. I'm Grace Young Foster, founder of the Inclusion Initiative and the host of the show. So pleased to have you all join us, and really pleased to have this inclusion conversation with our guest today, Dr. Abby. We've been getting to know each other quite a bit this past year. I've been following her work. She's been participating in the Inclusion Initiative events from time to time. And, you know, we've really had a lot of synergy being transracial adoptees, just having this experience of knowing what it's like to navigate as a person of color, but growing up in such white spaces with white expectations and not really understanding who we truly are until, we grew up a little bit and started that self-discovery phase and understanding what adoption really means to us and how it's impacted us. And so super pleased to have you on the show, Dr. Abby. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are
Nice
you?
to be here. So good.
Good. And so before we begin our conversation, I just want to introduce you a little bit. So Dr. Abigail /Abby Hasberry is an author, speaker, and educator. She is also a certified executive leadership coach, licensed marriage and family therapist associate, and holds a superintendent certification. Oh, I love that. She's the author of the R3 Framework, a workbook for healing difficult relationships, living life on purpose for a purpose and with a purpose, 15 identity affirming lessons, and her memoir, Adopting Privilege, which we'll talk about today. She is married and has raised 3 kids. Her personal journey as a transracial adoptee and birth mom fuels her dedication to supporting adult adoptees and birth moms in their own paths of healing and growth. Oh, that's really beautiful. I'm like already tearing up. And it's just the beginning, Abby. All right. Not yet. We have time for that. So to begin our conversation, why don't you just share with us what your experience has been like, how you experience your adoptee identity, and what you want us to know about it.
Sure. So growing up a transracial adoptee, of course, I knew right away, always knew that I was adopted. There was no way to get around that and pretend like it wasn't a thing. However, my family lived in Egypt from 1st to 3rd grade. And so before my identity as an adoptee kind of developed, I really had a development, I guess, of an identity as an American first, as an expat. And so I think my adoptee identity developed a little later in life than most adoptees, just because I was able to just be an expat and think of myself as an American at first until about 4th grade when we moved back to the US. And I really began to think about myself as an adoptee and how I looked different from my family and how I had been kind of kept out of Black community and Black culture and didn't have access to the things that around 7th grade, I was like, I'm kicking the door down and I deserve to have access to this. Why haven't I had access to this my entire life? And so, it just kind of developed from there, threw myself into kind of discovering who I was as a Black woman from there.
Wow. And that led to your career now as like a licensed marriage and family therapist and author of like around, identity issues and all of that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your pathway, right, to achieving these career milestones in this professional journey that you've had?
Sure, and it was definitely not at all a straight line. I went to college thinking that I was going to be a lawyer and was going to study psychology in undergrad and become a lawyer. But my freshman year in college, I took an African American Studies course. It was just I fell in love, and so I changed my major to African American Studies and sociology and double majored in that and graduated. And then was like, okay, no one's going to hire me. These aren't degrees that are like sought after. So I became a teacher because I just loved education and teaching and kids. And from education, I really started to think about my education and what I had been missing and how I had been othered, even as a Black woman, as a transracial adoptee, in all of those spaces. And so education became this thing that I was really obsessed with. So when I did my PhD, I did it in identity development. And specifically, I looked at the experiences of Black teachers in predominantly white and affluent schools and how we develop our identity and how we develop professional identities in those white spaces. And so that just led to lots of other kind of thinking about identity and thinking about healing and thinking about connection and all of the supports that we need. And so when I stopped being a principal in 2017, I thought about healing and my adoption identity again and started looking for a therapist and said, you know, I need to find a therapist who understands adoption, who is an African American and a woman, so that I don't have to explain
Yeah.
those things from the jump. And it was impossible to find that. And so what I did was decided to put myself in that space, and so became a therapist. And specifically, I work with primarily with adoptees and birth mothers.
Wow. And do you feel like you are incredibly accomplished, very, highly educated, all the things. And in our world, our ecosystem of adoptees and fosters, there's a lot of us that push and push and push and push to prove ourselves, to prove our
Absolutely.
value, prove our worth, to stay in the environments that we want to be in. I have an MBA, we all, like a lot of us do this. And do you feel like your lived experience as a transracial adoptee um, impacted you in that way, where you kept
Absolutely.
getting degrees and kept pushing yourself? Talk to
Yeah.
us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So last Sunday, November 10th, I think it was, I finished my third master's degree. So like 100% fall into that category of needing to prove myself. And I think it was education for me also because my mother was a teacher and my dad was a professor. And so it was kind of this way of showing that I belonged in this family. Let me show you how much education I can get. I belong
Oh,
here.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I 100% believe that I fall into that. Like education is part of how I show my worth.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That it sounds like it was like a lot of unintentional pressure.
Yes. Pressure disguised as no pressure because there was never like, you have to do really well, or they didn't check homework, or there wasn't any of that. But it was always this understanding that everyone in the family was connected biologically. I have three siblings who were all biologically related to my parents. And my mother was so proud of how smart we all were and would make comments about how we were all like within 10 points of IQ of each other, which always made me feel like I probably was the one with the lowest. I don't know that that's true, but it just made me feel that
Mm,
way. And so that was just always that pressure to be able to fit in with that educational expectation, yet no pressure. There was never pressure. It was all internal pressure that I put on myself.
right. But also, were there opportunities that like were your parents able to, be aware enough or have the information they needed, right, to give you context and give you some almost permission, right, to not have to be like them or be like your siblings because you were the am I right in this? You were the only adopted one, yeah?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
you were the only person of color in your family, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
It's like, duh, obvious that you would feel like you'd always have to try and conform and fit in.
Yeah.
Yet we all know that loving adoptive parents, as well intentioned as they always say things like, I don't see race, or
Yes. I was a blank slate.
you're not different than we are. We don't
Yes.
see you any differently. And then you're like, I
Then you're
do.
not seeing most of me. If that's yes,
You're like, I
absolutely.
literally am looking in the mirror at us right now, and
Yeah.
you are white and I am black. Like, hello.
Yeah, and it was interesting too with my mom especially. She made those statements, but on the flip side, she talked about how the world would see me differently. She really talked about race and how
Okay.
I had to find my space and how I would run into people who are racist. And she sometimes fought those battles for me in school, but she would say that she didn't see color and that she thought I was a blank slate when she adopted me. She told me that. Um, so it was interesting that she could see it in the world and how I would navigate the world, but not how I'd navigate my own family.
Oh, wow. That is very interesting. And first of all, I'm so glad that she had that just awareness of
Yes.
how racism would impact you from the outside.
Yes.
But it's very interesting how she couldn't realize at the time, like I'm sure things are different now, but didn't realize at the time how just being so different within your own family would just inherently impact you
Yeah.
from looks to how you spoke. All your mannerisms are different. Like you're not biologically related. Genetically, you have way different, it's that whole nature versus nurture. Nature is a huge part of who we are. So we just have our
Absolutely.
own personalities, our own habits, our own tendencies that just don't mirror our adoptive family at all. And so you're constantly reminded how you're an outsider in those ways too, not just how you look. And that's interesting that you had that experience with your adoptive family. Have you been able to talk to them now about that at
My
all?
siblings, yes. My mom and my parents, no. My mom passed away about a year ago, but she really believed what she believed. You mentioned the nature versus nurture. When I was in high school, and I started really exploring Black culture and my Black identity, she said to me one day, "I believed in nurture over nature until now." And so I was like, wow, she basically just said she thought she could love the Black off of me, but now that I'm kind of really exploring who I am as a Black woman, she's like questioning her stance and didn't even
Wow.
think about how that would impact me. And like here, but 40 years later, I'm thinking, I still think about that day that she said that to me.
Yeah.
So with my siblings, specifically really one of my brothers, I've been able to talk more about that, but no, not with my parents really at all, because she really was firm in her stance and had some of those kind of narcissistic personality traits that we see often in people who adopt,
Yeah.
especially transracially. Yeah, she was textbook in that way.
Interesting. And how were you able to find like support, right? Navigating your Black identity with right the white cultural that you had yourself been infused with just growing up in your white family. Talk to us a little bit about that experience, that journey.
Yeah, it really started in middle school, and honestly, it started with songs and music. I went to kind of give tribute to BET for allowing me to see Black
Oh
artists
yeah.
on on the screen and seeing those videos, especially in the '80s when I was in middle school. That really helped me. It actually helped me learn how to code switch and kind of like speak
Mm,
singing the way that my favorite New Edition, like that was my favorite, and so singing and kind of mimicking New Edition's language ended up kind of helping me learn how to code switch, how to it affected the way I dressed. And so then I would go out and meet people at the mall. And until high school, I went to private schools where I was the only Black kiddo, usually in my grade, often, always in my class, but sometimes in my whole grade. But so it was going out and trying to just fit in and meet people and change the way I dressed and learning how to do my hair, until high school when I asked my parents to allow me go to the local traditional public school where there were more Black kids, and most of my friends from then on were African American. So I just
wow.
kind of kicked the door open. It was just like I get to be here. I get to be in this space.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. And just really proud of you for being able to, realize that at such a young age. And gosh, don't I mean, I wish that all transracial adoptees would have been able to embrace it at such a
Yeah,
young age. A lot of us, myself included, just rejected, 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 rejected to the detriment. right? Of really knowing who we really were and like being able to lean into who we really
Yeah.
want to be. I got there a little later in life, but that's okay.
Yes,
I'm
it
still
is
young and
okay.
I have many, many decades now of being able to be very proud of being Grace, being Asian, being Korean, yet still, growing up here. I'm very American too. Like it's okay to be all the things.
All of it.
But when I was growing up, that wasn't okay. Like it for me, it was very much like you need to be as white as possible, or you were definitely going to be rejected.
Yeah.
And so I
Yes.
experienced that time and time again. And you know, I hope that especially younger people who are transracially adopted or fosters that are placed into homes who don't reflect right how what their ethnicities or cultures are. I hope like hearing this conversation and hearing other conversations that so many of us are having now really changes this for
Yeah.
them. Like that's the entire hope of why we do what we do, right? And so having said that, I'd really love to transition a little bit and talk about your current work and what you're doing, especially with your amazing memoir. I cannot wait to read it. You're saying it's going to be released in February, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so we're recording this a little ahead of time. And so cannot wait to get my hands on that and just learn more about your journey and what you have to say. But share with us a little bit about just, the culmination of finally writing your memoir. Like it's so personal
Yeah.
and I'm sure it's incredibly hard. I write a little bit about my journey for the Inclusion Initiative audience, and post, every long post about my own life that I do, it takes me weeks to write it.
Yeah. I get that.
And that's like, it's like 500 words.
Yeah. I
So
definitely get that.
I can only imagine what writing a full on memoir must have been like for you. And your background of coaching and being a counselor and advocating for birth moms and your lived experience as a TRA, like all of that I'm sure has like helped inform how you wrote the
Yes.
book and the content that's in it and the message. So not I don't want to give it all away, but tell us a little bit about, what you want us to really understand and learn from your book.
Yeah, so I started writing after reunion. So in 2010, I reunited with my son, who I had relinquished when I was in high school. And then in
Wow.
2017, via DNA and Facebook stalking, honestly, I reunited with both sides of my biological family. And so it was after that that I felt like I just needed to write. I needed to write about this. I had done some like video, just diaries in the process of reuniting and before and after meeting people. And that was great, but it felt like I just needed to write all of it down. And so I started writing probably around 2018, 2019, would leave it for a while, come back to it, started writing some more, joined a writing group, and started writing and sharing with them, and really just kind of getting it out. And it was really interesting how, in the process, one, like latent memories came up that I didn't remember until like writing and really getting it all out. But also how if, in the years between when I started and when I really finished about a year ago, how much things changed. And so I would read it again and just be like, I don't believe this anymore. How, how much it transitioned in my brain. And so I would have to rewrite parts and talk about how, when I wrote it the first time, this is what I believed. But now, just a few years later, so much has changed. And that was really interesting because I saw my own healing in real time, as I was writing it. And then deciding to
Yeah.
stop it at a point, in 2017, I stopped writing then. Like that's when my story ends, because I don't think that the things that have happened between then and now, I've really healed through. And so I haven't been able to really even share things beyond reunion, in my story, because I'm still working through those things and I want to share them from a fully healed place. And that really is what
Yeah.
my memoir is about, is all of the experiences and the things that happened, but also the healing that came from it, as I got older and really just kind of learned to accept myself, love myself, find boundaries, all of the things.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's you share that so concisely, but there's decades in those, in these couple of minutes that you shared. There's decades wrapped up in that. And as you navigated the writing and the editing and just deciding what you wanted to put in the book and what you didn't, like you shared some of that a little bit, but I'm curious to hear, like, from your perspective, especially as a birth mom that relinquished her child and as an adoptee that had that happen to you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about just I guess it's an intense experience, but I'm sure it was also like really healing to write about it and
Very.
unpack it and unfold it. But gosh, I can only imagine how intense that must have been, that period of time. So talk to us a little bit about that. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm still like processing it
Me
myself.
too.
I can't imagine. I cannot
Yeah.
imagine.
It was very intense, but freeing, because for so many years after relinquishment, I was in the fog. I was in the fog as a birth mother and as an adoptee. And so as I got out in both.
And sorry, can you explain what the fog is for
Sure,
people that don't know what that is?
sure. It's basically, like, in the kind of nutshell, it's believing the traditional narratives of saviorism in adoption, and that love is enough, and that it is a decision made out of love. And one of the things that I was able to really understand in the writing over the years and really processing all of that is that my decision was, while I loved my son, I absolutely still do with all my whole heart, the decision to relinquish him was 100% made out of fear. Fear and lack
Mm.
of resources. And so, kind of getting out of that understanding, like, oh, you were so brave to do this thing, and you gave this family this gift. That I realized in writing and in healing that no, I wasn't brave. I was absolutely scared out of my mind and had no one who was supporting me and showing me options of how I could parent my son. And so that gave me kind of a healing in my own spirit, really, to understand, one, that I was a kid. I was 16 when I got pregnant. And so I needed support that I didn't have. And so it was definite coercion. And that wasn't something that I even understood until about 5 years ago. And so really it just allowed me to process things that I was told, you'll get over it, you'll be okay. Don't think about it. All of those things that birth mothers are told. It allowed me to process those things finally, and processing them as a birth mother, it allowed me to process them also as an adoptee, to understand a little bit more about what my mother went through when she was relinquishing me. And especially because I am kind of I'm a victim, I guess, of secondhand rejections, because when I found her,
Mm.
she did not want anything to do with me. But being able to understand my own process and what happened, and just, I gave birth, and 2 weeks later, my parents sent me to track camp, with a doctor's note saying that I had a medical procedure and couldn't actually run that summer, because they thought I should just get
My
over it. And so, thinking about kind of,
goodness.
yeah, what I went through, I can understand how she hasn't healed. And so, me popping up and saying, "Hey, I'm your child," it gave me a lot more empathy for what she is dealing with, and the shame and the pain that she still feels. Because I had to heal all of that myself and was able to do that through writing. She hasn't had the chance to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of birth moms that were our birth moms. So, the ones that are the previous generation, right? I think many of them have that that lack of support, that lack of
Yeah.
understanding, and also the lack of being able to process, let alone heal.
Yeah.
Because exactly to your point, it was get rid of it. That was, a sin or a mistake or whatever, or you can't raise this kid, you can't afford to. I mean, we can't even get into like the social systems right
Yeah.
now on this podcast. We don't have time for that.
No time.
But just the pure fact, right, that there is not support for birth moms that are put in these situations where they feel like or they're forced to relinquish their kids.
Yeah.
Like the there's just a whole generation of birthing parents that have had to do that and could not process and still have not healed. And man, that is ridiculous. That is unacceptable. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. And I think, as you and I, our generation, as we have started having kids of our own, raising, you went through the exact same experience as your birth mom and relinquished your son. Like you have the deepest understanding and empathy of what that's like. Me as a mom who did not relinquish, was not forced to, I'm very privileged and lucky that I got to keep my daughter and I'm raising her and like there's no question, right? Like there's no question she's mine. She's part of my family. That has given me that experience of becoming a parent has just given me such a whole nother level of respect, empathy, of sadness
Yeah.
for what my birth parents had to go through and what they lost. And I would love to hear from you, like with your memoir, what you are hoping that it does for birth parents that relinquish their kids. And then I'm going to ask you, like, what do you hope from your memoir? What do you hope that it prompts allies to think about and allies to do in support of birth moms?
Absolutely. So one, I just hope it starts conversations. I hope that my vulnerability and transparency, I mean, I did not hold back. I didn't leave anything out. I just kind of justified in my head if people wanted me to write nicely about them, they should have treated me better. And so I wrote it all and included it all. And so I really hope that it just sparks people to have conversations and to say, like, this thing happened to me and I need to talk about it. And it's okay for me to talk about it because I'm not the only one. That's really my biggest hope. I also hope that people start to realize that I heard once at some point someone said that suicide was a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and I believe adoption is the same. Had I just wasn't ready at the moment, but I would have been ready. I talk about how I wanted my son to be with this family who had a mother who was a mother who was a lawyer and a father who was a doctor, and I wanted him to be in a place where there was African American culture and he could be, really understand his identity as a Black man. That's my family now. I am a PhD, a doctor, my husband's a lawyer. So it was a temporary problem, and I made a permanent decision, coerced into a permanent decision. And so I want people to understand that as well. And I want the narrative to shift.
Yeah.
I want the narrative around adoption to center adoptees first, and then also the lived experiences of first families. It's just the narrative that is around adoption is so harmful to our mental health as adoptees. And I want people to understand that. I want allies to understand that and start to have real conversations about the loss, about trauma, about all of the things that we know about ACEs. Why is adoption still not on the list of ACEs? Why can you check for saying, yes, my parents were divorced, but you can't check to say, yes, I was separated from my family at birth or through foster system or whatever it is. So that's, I guess, I think that answers the question. I want conversations and I want a narrative shift.
Yeah. 100%. Conversations, narrative shift. That's step one.
That is step one. Absolutely.
In your opinion, in your experience, in your advocacy and educational work around all of this stuff, like what do you want people to do as a step two?
I can't say I'm quite at abolitionist yet because I don't see another solution, and I don't believe in tearing something down until you have another option for it. But I do believe that we need to see adoption as a capitalistic market, and we need to change that. We need to find homes for kids who need homes and not find babies for parents who want babies. We need to shift how we really look at that because that will change everything. Had someone really tried to think about my situation as a birth mother, as someone who needed to figure out how to parent my child, as opposed to trying to figure out how to get this other family a baby, it would have been a completely different situation.
Yeah.
And so that is my, like, that's what we need to do, is really think about the industry in a completely different way, and so that we can stop all of this trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm in full agreement with you there. And I think, with a lot of the international adoptions that have happened in our country, it's becoming very obvious that capitalism was a big part of that decision,
Driving
of that
factor.
movement. There's always, right, the good intentioned parents and the good intentioned institutions that help facilitate all of this. But good intentions are not enough.
Yeah. No.
Sorry, good intentions don't fix the huge problems and issues and lifelong impact on people
Yes.
who are the adoptees, who are placed into foster care, who are relinquished, who are torn away from their families, and then vice versa, right? The families that are torn away from their kids
Yeah.
or forced to relinquish or feel like they have no options, like you, and lose. How many years with your son did you lose?
Yeah. 22, 21, 22. And
Two
more than
over
that.
2 decades.
And more than
Yeah.
that, because he's still dealing with his own trauma. And so there are waves when he wants to have contact with me, and there are, years really when he hasn't wanted to. And so even more than that, it continues.
Yeah, it's that ripple effect.
Yeah.
And all happening, right? Because one quote unquote very simple decision of, I'm going to adopt this kid. I'm going to foster this kid. There's a lot more that goes into it. So I really appreciate you just shedding light on that and helping people critically think about adoption, about the child welfare system, about how we support birthing families and parents that need resources. Like, right? If we would just infuse some resources into supporting families that are less privileged, that have challenges that, they need some support to overcome, right? In order to continue to be a healthy family, continue to be healthy parents, raise healthy children. Like, if we can put some of the money that we put into this adoption and foster care system into actually supporting families that need it the most, it would just make such a huge difference.
Yeah.
I know it would. I know it would.
I think it's that support, but also information. Because had I known at 16 the trauma that adoption is, and I was completely bought into the adoption narrative at 16, and had I known that I was facing trauma, the reason why I wasn't being able to connect with people, and I had all of these boundaries, the reason why I didn't like to be hugged at 16, all of those things were really tied back to adoption. And had I really had any information about that, I would have never done that same trauma, placed that same trauma on my son. And so it's support and information. We need informed consent. And I wonder if my parents had understood what adoption was and how I would have been traumatized as a kiddo, if they would have, one, got me therapy, but also if they would have they wouldn't have pushed adoption for me when I was 16, if they had understood the traumas that I had been through as my parents too. So information too.
100. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we just know that there's a lot of work to do there all around. But so grateful that there are now voices and lived experience like yours surfacing and pushing through, right, to try and be that resource, that community for the people that we've been talking about: adoptees, fosters, birthing families. So everybody in those, with those identities and circumstances, we really want you to visit Dr. Abby, check out her book. I'm going to put her Instagram handle up at dear_Abby, and just utilize, right, the important information and education that she's providing, especially if you're struggling, or especially if you're thinking about, or have gone, even if you've gone through it 2 decades ago. Like, it's never too late to start your healing journey. And we're going to transition to the next part of this conversation, which is the rapid fire question.
Okay. Yeah.
But before we do that, I want you to share, if you could say one thing, like convey one idea out of your memoir and just all the work, right, that you've done to get to this place, what would you want to share?
Ooh. Listen to adoptees, listen to our voices, listen to our lived experience, and understand that we are the experts of our own lives. And while we may not be the experts of the full adoption experience, all of our experiences put together are the full adoption experience, and we all should be listened to.
That's right. Like no one experience is the blanket experience for the entire community. Like it's so silly that
Yeah.
that we think that. But it's like you said, the dominant narratives for so long have just conditioned society to think that it's either the trauma story or
Yeah.
the fairy tale happy ending story, and there's just so much nuance in between.
So much
So
in between.
thank you for your message. Thank you for your
Absolutely.
book. Okay, are you ready for rapid fire?
No, but let's do it anyway.
Yeah, these are fun. These are fun. Okay.
All right.
What is your favorite food?
Ice cream. Is that a food? It is. It's all the
Yeah.
food groups. Ice cream, 100%.
It's like one of my main food groups. So yeah, I love it. Great. What is your superpower as an adoptee?
Listening, really listening and attuning and really getting into the heart of what someone is saying and feeling.
Yeah. Love that. What did you dream of doing when you were a kid?
I wanted to be a lawyer, so I married one instead.
It's a nice workaround.
Yeah, close enough. Lawyer adjacent.
Exactly. I love that. What's one thing on your bucket list?
Ooh, I'd love to go to Dubai, and I don't know why.
Oh,
But I've just always wanted to go to Dubai.
yeah. Wow. I did not expect that. I love that. And then finally, just general. This is general. So just coming from you to, the world, like what is a piece of advice that you want to share to the world?
So I heard this saying a few years ago, and it just stuck with me, and that is, don't defend yourself, define yourself. And that has changed kind of who I am and how I show up and how I take up space and navigate the world, because I concentrate on just defining myself in all of those spaces instead of worrying about anything else or trying to defend anything that I do.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one. Oh my goodness. Do you know what
I
quote
don't
that's?
know.
Okay, I need to
No
look that up.
idea. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And honestly, I think that is particularly profound and insightful for adoptees and fosters.
Yes.
We spend our whole lives being defined by
Yes.
others and right? Like feeling like we've had to define ourselves for others.
Yeah. Defending our
And
existence.
yeah, like defending, but now creating our own narrative is so critical. Oh, Dr. Abby, you just like hit that on the head. That was amazing. That will stick with me for a very long time. So, well, thank you for just sharing about your book. Thank you for sharing about you and your experience. And everyone, Dr. Abby's book is coming out in February of 2025.
Yes,
so, yes, there you go. So look for Adopting Privilege. And if you follow Dr. Abby, again, here's her Instagram handle, you'll be able to, keep up to date when the release happens. And thanks all for joining us today. And all of Dr. Abby's links and the information about the book and the information about the Inclusion Initiative, those will all be in the show notes. So thanks everyone for tuning in for this episode, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, share, and follow us. Check out our show notes to know where to find us on social, and our website is theinclusioninitiative.com. If you're an adoptee of color or a foster care alum and you want to join our professional community, it's free, by the way. Hit me up via DM, or you can find our email in the show notes. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.